Committee meeting. Today is Monday, July 24th. Our first item of business is consideration of the minutes from the July 10th, 2023 meeting. If there are no additions or corrections, we'll consider a motion for approval of those minutes.
I move approved.
Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Next up, we have an update on proposed amendments to our parking and towing ordinances. This is going to be presented by Christina Argo of EDOT and Julie Bernard of the Office of the City Attorney. Hello.
Pretty, okay, we good? Yeah. Yes.
So, you may want to, hit the high points first, because I know Council Tate has to leave in a few minutes.
So we've, still cleaning up the drafts to get them. There's a lot of formatting that needs to be done in the booting and towing. I provided the committee with a copy of that ordinance with tracked changes in it. So you can see the changes before I put it in the usual ordinance format. And then the ordinance that is to regulate commercial parking lots that is drawn from what is currently chapter 1015 in the city code. And this will essentially, will repeal it and either replace it in that location or put a new chapter, move it into Title 12, which is where most of the permitting and licensing regulations are. So, it's been, these are substantially, there's no huge difference in what you saw for the committee at the whole meeting back in June. There were a few things in the parking lot ordinance that were, that are really kind of outdated or obsolete. I've kind of taken those out or updated them a bit. So there's some things that came out. There's, I did in speaking with someone, we discussed that some of the mobile app places are use dynamic pricing where the price might change. I mean, even some that post their rates, may have different rates at different times of day. So I put in a definition to capture dynamic pricing, and so that may make it hard for a lot to post if they're using that method to post all their rates, at the property. So here I've said if they're using the mobile technology app or payment system, then they can post that, clearly post which they're using, and if there is dynamic pricing, to make that clear. So I could put that in. There are some fees and things we haven't filled in yet, and a few dates that we need to do. Cleaned up the review and grant of the permit that VDOT, will review the application and see if it's complete, sufficient, correct, and if it meets all the requirement, and that it won't adversely endanger or affect vehicular or pedestrian traffic on abutting streets, they will grant the permit. If there's anything, if it's incorrect, insufficient, or incomplete, or where there's something that needs to be brought into compliance, they let them know, and then the applicant has a chance to, update their application, cure any of the problems. If there's something that would take longer, than 10 days to fix, then they can give a plan with a compliance schedule in it. And then if it, really the reason for denial would be if there is some kind of hazard to the public from granting it. Updated the part about maintenance of the grounds, so that it's on bottom of page 5, going on to page 6, which just referring back, the zoning ordinance has standards now. There were standards in chapter 1015. There are things about paving the lot and, landscaping and demarcation. So with, they just basically said they've got to comply with the applicable standards in the zoning ordinance for all those kinds of things. Kept a few of the provisions about, keeping the pavement in good condition, making sure that the demarcation for spaces and traffic flow are clear, and then there is a reference to maintaining illumination in the zoning ordinance. I put in something here that there needs to be adequate illumination, so signage, markings can be read, and also aid in people driving through or walking from their car in the lot, so there's not like hidden potholes and things. I took out the barrier section, I left that struck because there is a similar provision in the zoning ordinance, so I just decided to refer back to that. And that is pretty much the substantive changes that are made. Did add, there was a section that said parking lots using honor boxes. I've changed that to stationary unattended payment devices. Talked to one lot owner, say honor box kiosk for other unattended device, and I've talked with one parking lot owner that they just still have a lot that they use the stationary, payment location, a kiosk or something. So it just added it needs to be maintained in good working order at all times. So
I guess the overarching theme is we've updated language to bring us into the 21st century. We have, more or less, we've cleaned up a lot of the ordinance where we're not duplicating language and trying to reference where we already have these standards in place to make it easier for folks to be able to comply. And then, I have one more point now, I can't remember what it was, but yeah, that's, and then we're combining, putting everything together into one section of the ordinance, because it's, reading ordinance is difficult in itself, so we need to have all the information in one section.
So on page 7, we are requiring people to identify themselves and to know that you work here and not
That's
somebody just running around.
if they have an attendant on site, then yes, that person would be required to identify themselves. In the booting and towing ordinance, they are required to wear their identification to identify themselves. That is currently the situation, and I know we've seen some complaints where that, and some police reports where that does not seem to be happening. So, I think we put some language to read, I don't know if we did it to read for it, I mean, it's already in there, but, we'll, I'm sorry, there's a lot here, and,
So Attorney Menard, one of my final question I passed back out to Councilor Quinn, you said when the rates change, are you gonna require that they be on the same, just say if you park here at 4 o'clock, you may park there at 1 o'clock too, I'm just saying from 8 to 1, it's this rate, but if you park before the whatever time, then it's that rate, because I think we heard a lot of people were saying the pricing was changing on them.
yeah, some way to note on the signage, and that may be, the sign examples, which this block here, at the bottom would be for, changeable, and I guess would that be where, will there be room for rates to go there? And
It is a challenge when nowadays where you have technology that enables companies to change rates on the fly, and it doesn't really make sense that we would have them change a physical sign. So I think we're gonna have to find the right language to put on the sign that indicates somewhere where that consumer can go, and reference, whether it's the payment app or whatever, that will show the rate. Because I don't think that it is realistic to expect a company to put their rates on the sign when they are using dynamic pricing. So, and I think that's really where the parking lot
just like, you know, Uber or Lyft, for example, I tried to,
Right.
when I tried to, initially tried to schedule my Lyft ride from Tacoma to Seattle to get to the airport, they wanted a rate of $300. Now normally that would cost, you know, less than a third of that. But because it was 4 o'clock in the morning, they were able to demand that higher rate. I didn't pay that, by the way. Caught a ride with somebody, so it cost me zero. Anyway,
Right, like, so a rate, you know, in a prime district where there's dining and other things to do in the night, in the evening hours, you might expect someone to charge a higher rate for parking between, you know, 5 PM and midnight versus, you know, a rate at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Just like $50.
Yeah.
Is that during this time? It's what it is. Then I would imagine with Uber and Lyft, there's probably a lot less people that want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to drive somebody around. So you can,
exactly.
premium
So there's
cars.
there's less availability.
Yeah.
So,
So I agree that that's kind of the directions things are going, and, you know, perhaps at some point, if we can ever get our on-street parking modernized,
When?
we'll
Yeah.
have, when we get our on-street parking modernized, the city may also, you know, adopt a dynamic pricing model, so it's definitely the direction things are going.
That language, Counselor Tate, is at the bottom of page 4, going up to page 5, going on top of page 5. Right now, we just really said, you know, that the law needs to, that it needs to say that it's subject to dynamic pricing, but we can, you know, look at that. You know, I think definitely should be encouraged to have the rates posted, just so people know what they're getting into, before they park.
So, as Councilor Tate needs to leave, can we go quickly over the towing and immobilization services?
Right, and again, there's not a lot significant, from what we talked about in June. Few little adjustments, going back into it because I know we talked last week and our other third leg of our team, it was working on some other things, that I don't think are captured in this, at this point. So that's why I told you in the email, Council Point Sandra on that, but I told the committee, that I didn't, that's why I didn't put it directly to set the hearing tomorrow, because we still need to clean up and format a few things. So, we did add, a section, and I would need Attorney Rutledge here to help me find it. But
leaving the scene?
yeah, we did add some language, for one thing, you know, we know we had a complaint at the beginning of the year where there was, bottom of page 21, there's some language, about trying to tow, Lord, it was like a tandem, that they're towing a pickup truck with a U-Haul trailer
Right.
attached to it, and you know, there was some video that were having trouble maneuvering, so we put in a section to address that, and also a section to, require, you know, if they damage other vehicles or damage the property while we're trying to effect a tow, that they not leave until the police come and investigate.
How did you?
And I think, and actually, I think this one, I have to check. No, maybe, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the right, that's the right. No, I read the right version.
Top of page 22.
Yeah. The B there. So, you know, in damage to parked vehicles, municipal property, property of the parking lot owner, or property owned by others. So the cars are not just drove off the lot at the risk of other
guess this applies to both, ordinances. Are there, on the parking lot side, is there any requirement for, video monitoring or other, security monitoring, and for the towing operator, are they required to document the tow in any way? I mean, I would think that they would want to, just to, protect themselves, but are we putting anything like that in the ordinance?
There, I have to look back because there has always been something, I think, here about, documenting it.
I don't believe you're requiring video.
Right, yeah, let's see. They have to have photographs or videos of the vehicle and the location from which the vehicle is being towed, photos or videos of the condition of the vehicle prior to the tow, and other documentary evidence substantiating the reason for the removal.
Okay,
So that's always been there,
okay.
so. There is not, specifically in the part that has, of doing the other ordinance related to the parking lots, we had some provisions that were going to, that require after so many complaints, a video audit. That was really when they were using the honor boxes, and we talked about it. I don't think that was ever used. We just decided to take that out. But it is required to have documentary evidence of the tow, so.
Okay.
And you'll also see, right now, all the language about signs is struck in this ordinance, because we've got to get this put in, so.
Okay.
And I can talk generally about signs with you guys.
Yeah, well, in the course of talking about that, I noticed that on this draft that you have, that it appears that we've amended the ordinance to make the fines for, or what we allow, for a charge for towing or booting the same.
No, we haven't.
This is a draft.
As a mock-up, right?
Well, because essentially you can have cars towed or booted from one location, right? And so I just,
Well, it's something that I'd like for us to consider, because, that we do not have any booting taking place, in part because the way our fines are currently structured, or what we allow for a fee, rather, the way it's currently structured, it's, we don't have booting taking place because it's financially more attractive just to tow the car. Okay, so the towing fee kind of sets the starting point to where making a decision about whether or not they're gonna utilize booting. So I've spoken to a tow truck operator and asked him about the $160. Basically the question being, is that a reasonable amount for the city to allow a towing company to charge? And the feedback that I got was that he, him as a business owner, for a consensual tow, where the vehicle owner is asking you to tow a vehicle, he wouldn't do it for less than $125.
so your car is broken down and you need to go to the repair shop, $125.
Right.
Okay.
So, I'm saying all of that to say that when you account for a non-consensual situation where the tow truck operator is, you would assume, at greater risk for liability, I can imagine $160 being, perhaps it's slightly too high, but it seems reasonable to me in that context. But I do agree that, you know, we should consider adjusting the booting, what we allow for booting, if not equivalent, you know, closer to what we allow for towing, just so that we don't create a dynamic where booting simply doesn't get done because it's just financially more lucrative to tow.
Yeah, is that right? Or 60? Maybe it's, I think it's 60. I think the current leading rate is 60.
Yes.
So, and some of that is, you know, the different, you've got a truck that was taking a car off. I had a similar conversation with a towing company 2 years ago, and they were, at that time, I think their consensual, you know, or their non-consensual was lower, this particular company, than 160. But they had, you know, pointed out that when they do non-consensual, you know, if somebody's not standing there handing the key, it's more difficult. You know, it's more difficult, takes a longer time. So that was one reason why it was set, and it was kind of comparable, looking across comparable cities. That was kind of a midpoint. There's some cities that allow a whole lot more, and some that have less, so it was kind of the midpoint at 10 years ago. So that's fine. We would take, you know, the recommendation to, you know, increase the fee, and we'll look at that. But with booting, you know, they go out, they put the boot, they leave, and then it's to come back. And you know, too, you did, you know, kind of correct. And these aren't fines. That's something that needs to be clear to everybody. They aren't fines. This is the service of coming back and releasing the boot or
Right.
giving the car back.
Yeah.
So-
It's the maximum what the city allows them to charge. And
Yeah.
it should be noted that was added a few years ago, because previous to that change, there was no maximum allowed, and we had a situation where tow truck operators were trying to charge really exorbitant amounts for impounding a vehicle.
Yes, and we can only regulate the non-consensual part of it. Otherwise, we can't regulate pricing for towing companies.
Okay. Christine, you were about to talk about the draft signage.
Yes. So this is a draft, but you will notice, you know, the look and feel of the sign is more modern. It is, I think it is more attention grabbing than what we have currently out in the real world. I think that the language on the left-hand side, the high you park here, will probably stay, you know, as is, unless we receive other feedback. And then in the gray part down below is where, you know, the messaging would change. So here we have a private parking for permit holders only. There might be a lot where there is no public parking. So here it would say no public parking, right? It would, that kind of messaging would change depending on what type of lot, you know, or, you know, parking for the public only after 5, whatever that is. And then we would get into some of the details of you know, what would need to be listed down below, rates and contact information, even though the number will be prominent in one of these boxes. And these boxes, you know, to your point, yeah, we don't see a lot of booting, but if someone does operate, potentially they could operate towing and booting on their premises, and so that gives the owner the room to be able to put both sets of information there. So we'll, you know, that is something BDOT will be monitoring, but we will be requiring all current owners, operators to update their signage based on this template here. And there'll be language that will be standard that they will have to include. And then the other difference in the ordinance currently, it talks about signs you have facing the roadway and signs you have in the interior parking lot. We want to have one sign, a large sign. This one is actually set to 36 by 48 inches that has all the information on it. And so certainly, I think it's important to have a sign as you drive in and a sign in the interior, and both those signs will have the same information, it'll be one sign. Because I don't, if you guys have been out there lately, usually there's 2 or 3 different looking signs, and it's a lot to take in, so. So that was really our vision and our goal in cleaning up the signs.
Some of the lots they're using like the text arc and everything, they've got a lot of clutter signage.
So that would have to be incorporated onto, we'll call it the master sign. So if you're using text to pay, then maybe that information is down here and the QR code lives here. So,
Okay. That was, yeah, my question was about standardization, so we want at least, the parking lot owners will be free to add additional signage, if they so choose, but there would be standardized signage that occurs uniformly across all of these, types of, parking
I would rather
facilities.
them not add additional signs, because I think that's where we get into clutter. So I think in the built environment, there's so many things needing our attention, right? Signs, lights, this. I think we need one sign, or one standard sign. Either you use it at the entrance and at the interior of your parking lot. But we don't want to see anything else scattered around.
And there are lots we will have to deal with where there's no one entrance and exit. There are some lots that I'm aware of, and we have language, about where you placed it. So there's some places that you can come in from a street, and then on the other side, you can come in from the alley, different ways. So we need, there may need to be signs, wherever you come in. There's some ways we have dealt with that in the ordinance, but we're gonna try to do it so it's less clutter and having, more striking sign that it's,
So,
We'll
more visible.
we'll be reviewing that. We'll look at the site and their proposal on where they propose their amount of their signage, and we'll approve that or we'll adjust it.
and look at, hey, somebody could sneak in from the back here and never see, if we just do standard 2 or 3 signs, they wouldn't see that you need to have something over here, or close that entrance off.
so that, those signage requirements and how the facility is set up, would that be covered in a zoning ordinance, or will it be covered in
It'll be covered in this.
this? Okay, in this. All right. I noticed that, there are some dates yet to be determined as to, when permitting and, compliance are gonna be required, or what are you guys thinking in terms of, we're looking at having this come for council for consideration in the month of August. What are you guys thinking in terms of what's reasonable for compliance dates for permitting and signage and all that kind of stuff?
We had discussed that, and primarily, we do need to put in a provision in the booting and towing for, like existing lots to update their signage. We haven't, put a date in there. That's language is struck right now, but there would be language to come into compliance as far as,
We discussed 60 days.
yeah, we
To
discussed.
give current operators 60 days to get their sign updated.
Right, and then with the commercial parking lot ordinance, it would probably be fairly similar, obviously if you're a new lot, booting and towing, you're supposed to have permits currently. Parking lots should have had, at least certain of them should have had, permits previously, but have not. And this expands the reach of that ordinance, given everything that's going on with the booting and towing and complaints that the city's receiving, decided to expand of it. So, you know, so we need to give them time to come into compliance. The bidding and towing, if they're already doing it out there, they don't need time to comply, they should have a permit now. And then it would probably be similar in 60 days. And I just left those blank for us to have one more conversation about what we wanted. So, and then, of course, would be given longer if there's an issue with the configuration of the lot or like striping or something like that. If there are those issues that a lot needs to resolve,
Construction.
give them, paying whatever, give them some time to work with DDOT and PT on what's needed and time to bring that into compliance, so that would be, longer.
One other situation that I know is not uncommon around the city is where we have, lots that are seasonal. So these are, utilized, they're private lots, they may even be, a lot that it isn't necessarily zoned for that purpose. But, the classics in town, and we have, folks, doing impromptu paid parking lots. Is that circumstance taken into account in?
It is to some extent. I believe there is a business license requirement for those. I would have to look back, but I recall there being one. We had in here that if property was used for somewhere, there's something on event parking, parking for special events, it's on the last page. And this is really talking about parking lots and not talking about the situation that you're talking about parking in people's, front yard to get pricing. We could include that, we could make this applicable to that, but it's just basically, if you're gonna charge people to park on your property just for a special event, you need to have somebody there before and after, to take the money and make it, it needs to be clear, and so they need to provide receipt to the patron.
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, kind of keeping up with technology, we have a local, company called Clutch that allows people to, basically sell parking at their residence or wherever. So I just want to bring that to your attention as something, we perhaps need to at least, be aware of. To my knowledge, there hasn't been any issues with it, but, you can imagine a situation where, I live in a single-family residential neighborhood, and my next-door neighbor is, selling parking at his residence adjacent to me, and, that's not an intended use of the property.
That would probably need to be a zoning investigation, that would need to be complaint to the zoning inspectors and let them check it out. And again, if it's, if they're doing it on a regular basis, that would be a zoning problem. There is the city does allow people to provide parking for big events like the Classic. But, that's very specialized and particularized. I don't know if that's in the zoning ordinance or not, but, so that would be, the difference.
Yeah.
If they're doing it like today, that would be a zoning problem. If they're in the zone around Legion Field and Magic City Classic is going on, that's another situation, but they should have a business license for it, and,
Okay.
So there are some
Yeah, I think
steps
it's
that
one of
we
those
do.
things like short-term rentals that currently,
And I'm not gonna mention other names, but there are some other apps that I have become aware of that have, yeah,
yeah,
can be problems.
So when you
Yeah.
say seasonal, do you really mean special events? Or do you mean like for 3 months?
well, no, I mean, special events, that's a circumstance that I'm currently aware of, with the gig economy, we're gonna have lots of challenges.
Yeah,
Everybody's got to hustle, so,
it's wearing me out, I can say that.
Seasonal, like you were saying, on Council Camp, because around Protective, I know there are people that have property there, that during the last season or in the USFL, they were renting or, using that for parking.
right.
So I guess it sort of is seasonal.
Yeah, and some
Right.
of that property is only suitable for, like, folks in four-wheel drives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Off-roading?
Yeah,
Right.
and that does probably need to be looked at across the board, because there is, I think they would, with the games there, they would probably fit into what's allowed currently. Now, I did add something into this parking for special events, and this was really, mainly these are commercial lots, and would need to break this out or deal differently with it, because as I said, if they use a mobile technology system for payment, and they maintain signs indicating the use of such payment system. So, the situation that, that may make me want to, revise this a little bit from what you just said
Okay,
about
yeah,
that one out.
yeah. All I'm thinking is obviously it's a lot of work, to revise ordinances and, certainly we likely won't be able to account for every potential scenario, but, while we're at it, we're gonna take
Yes.
advantage of the opportunity to
Yeah.
capture any low-hanging fruit, for sure.
Yeah, this will at least get it up to date with some of the changes that have happened in the last few years, and, by all means, that's a change I wasn't aware of. So, that needs to be accounted for, and as you said, there will be other things that will come up, so, we can't account for everything that we do as much as we can.
Okay. We have some members of the public here with us. We want to get this right. If there's anybody who wants to offer comments while we're talking about this, I'd be open to hearing that. Sure. Come on up. You gotta come stand close so that we can get you on the microphone.
Hey, JT Thornberry, Barber Companies. I appreciate y'all opening up the floor. I've talked to Julie and just got the edits to the ordinance earlier, so I haven't had a chance to read through it.
Sure.
So they have some follow-up. But just when I spoke to Julie earlier, Barber owns both pay-for parking lots in the downtown area and parking lots that are not open to the public, but they are in areas where parking is at a premium. So it's like one property in particular, it's an office warehouse, and we do have tenants that are there 24/7. And so it's imperative that we have that lot open to only people who are authorized to be there. And it's actually near several retail establishments, bars and restaurants where people park there and we're going to park. And so we have an interest both in policing those lots from those types of lots that are not necessarily good paying, not making any profit off of people parking there. Or, we do own a couple of lots, where people pay. One is a pay-for ad that we engage with Park and Local, does all the city's work. And then we also have a low rate kiosk. And so we've had a low rate kiosk for a while. So, in terms of the ordinance itself, and understand it needs to be updated, particularly in light of the, I guess, the proliferation of parking from these pay by app, which was around 10 years ago. So, that's really, I don't have a whole lot of specifics. I do want to read through it first, but one thing I do have a question about, we're not a towing business. We just want to make sure that our lots are available to those who are authorized to be there. So do pay attention to what the towing companies can and cannot do. And I do have a question about the proposed grace period. And we didn't even discuss that in this meeting, maybe it was discussed in the previous meeting, but how to know with certainty that somebody actually was there at a certain time. Because I could envision a scenario where, we don't want tow companies to literally be parked and then somebody leaves the lot and they go in. I don't know what the definition of predatory towing is, but I think that's the type of situation people go for.
Yeah, so you're referring to, in the current version of the ordinance, that it's proposed to allow a 15-minute grace period between the time when the individual leaves their vehicle to when the enforcement towing would, or booting in this case, would allow it to take place. So,
Right.
yeah, you're asking, how would that be documented? If I come back to my vehicle and it's only been 14 minutes, and how do we get
Yeah.
specific about that?
That's it, because we do have, our tow companies are on just a schedule. And it may be set at a certain time, or maybe just random. They're driving around in the middle of the night, and then they just come upon a lot, and how do they know if that car's been there for 15 minutes?
And that's something, it is proposed, it's not really been debated by the council, and of course, and the council is intending to hold a public hearing, on this, so that will be.
So in the past, I'm not suggesting that this be the case, but just providing an example of how it's worked in the past. So traditionally, with on-street parking, what happened was that our parking enforcement would actually mark on the tire, on the sidewall of the tire of the vehicle, when they observed the vehicle was in violation, and then they would come back, and if it's been the allowed amount of time, then they would be ticketed if that time's been expired. So that's one example of how that could work. I'm not suggesting that we actually do that, but in any case, that would be a greater burden on the company that has been employed to do enforcement. But that's one option, is that they have to document the time that the vehicle has been there without being paid.
And then I guess the follow-up, the rationale for giving that would be a lot of people, I'm guessing, a lot of people now, they may park their car and then they want to get somewhere quickly. And as opposed to previously where they put coins in the box, spits out a ticket, or they do a credit card, spits out a ticket, they can walk down the street and pay on their app. And so, on situations though, like for the lot, explain earlier where public's not allowed to park there at all. It's only people with a hang tag, that are tenants in the building. That would be a situation where that would be, previously, they're not allowed to park there at all, and now we're giving them 15 minutes to be here to come into the establishment or whatever. There's also a situation where, somebody's paying with a ticket, because we do have a kiosk. I can see the rationale for giving a grace period if somebody's on their phone paying and giving 15 minutes to pay. But if they know the signage is very clear that you cannot park here unless you pay right here, and you don't pay right there, then I don't know that there's any reason for a grace period.
Yeah,
We can discuss, how that might be more tailored to the situations, and I will say, for the committee and public, I had, shared the draft with Mr. Thornberry, even though I'm not quite ready to share it publicly, we still got some formatting. Barber Companies, their employee Don Irwin 10 years ago was very helpful in discussing the ordinance at that time, and, with the very situation that was explained about the 24/7 parking and everything. So when Mr. Thornberry reached out to me after the town hall or the committee of the whole meeting, he wanted to, have some input, and I think it is valuable to hear that, because Barber Companies does have that kind of dual facets of owning property that's used for parking, and, also discussion of how the mobile apps are allowing people to be more flexible with what they allow with their property for parking, and I think given some of the changes that are being considered for parking requirements in the zoning ordinance and everything, I think it's good to encourage, that opportunity. So it's trying to balance, so that, was glad Mr. Thornberry was able to come today, and we got a chance to look at everything, but to give the committee some feedback from that perspective of a property owner. I think, and then there's kind of this different interests that we're trying to balance, in this whole thing, and that's very critical, that property owners are able to use their property, but that the public is treated fairly, that they have fair notice of what happens if they don't follow the rules, and,
You make a good point when you say the public, so I do think that there's a difference between a lot that is for private use and a lot that allows public use, even if it's only for a portion of the day, so I think that we should look at that, because if it is no public parking ever, that's very clear about, the 15-minute thing to me doesn't seem as applicable, because it's
Yeah.
very clear you should be there.
and we can tailor that.
Yeah.
There may be, I won't take any more of your time, but that's just things.
no, I mean, my consideration is that, these are significant changes that are gonna affect a lot of people, and, while we have a lot of folks who have been asking us for years to make these changes, we also wanna do it right, and, not rush into it without, taking into account a lot of different perspectives. So I appreciate, and welcome any feedback that you may have, as we move forward. Any other questions? So, again, we would like to bring this before the full council in the month of August, which means that the Transportation Committee would need to make some recommendation and advance it to the council. Or Council Woods, are you prepared to do that today? Are you comfortable with doing that today?
At minimum, we just send no recommendation. We definitely
nobody ever picked up and did anything with it, so.
Yeah, I think this is specifically for, in the towing and mobilization.
What section is it?
Page 4.
Oh, yeah, let's pull it up here. Yeah, that was, originally when we first did it, it was, Public Safety Committee, probably this will probably transfer to this committee. But it was supposed to have been reviewed periodically to, by that committee.
So I would say either have a review or maybe include it in 1219-43, just in the reporting that goes to the chief,
Okay.
so the council at least have some visibility. But I think we have a lot of things that we're supposed to be getting information on that we just don't. And part of it is, we're not, we gotta go through and see what else we can do.
Yeah.
And get it.
I mean, I agree that the provision in here where, the chief of police had some role, that definitely, has not, occurred. And so that portion specifically,
Councilor Quinn, can I piggyback on Councilor Wood's question or
Mhm.
concern? I want to know, where is the level of oversight? Is that with VDOT or, you said VDOT will go back and they will look at the signage and those type of things. Is this done on a periodic basis or, and I apologize for not knowing if this is already part of this.
Yeah, the council, that's, the,
Because I know planning and zoning has a responsibility, but I see the concern about council overview or just, police presence, but some type of security overview. So that's what you're talking about, council as well, or just from a council?
Just a report, and so whatever incidents or issues or problems,
Mhm.
this was kind of to know whether the measures that were taken
Or being.
were working,
Mhm.
from the council's perspective. As far as enforcement, currently, Birmingham Police handle pretty much all the aspects of it, including the signage and everything. So with this, VDOT is going to take over looking at the physical configuration of the lots, the signage, and that piece of it for permitting the commercial lots, but they would also look at the signage and that sort of thing with any lot. Obviously, as we said, with review for the things that are required in the zoning ordinance for any parking lot. And so on the construction, and layout and everything of a parking lot, as far as permitting, VDOT's going to take the lead on that. And then obviously PDP will be a layer in there on their requirements. So it'll be, in consultation with them, but then VDOT would definitely be primary with the signage.
So VDOT's role is really more about the physical environment, whereas PPD's role is more about the enforcement piece related to the permitting and the business operations, because they're the ones who have the authority.
The
We
police.
don't have any authority to write a ticket, right?
But I do like the
Yeah.
observation about our awareness as a council, because
right.
we don't want to find out about problems as it comes to the media, or we've got residents that are complaining. So there is that oversight. So I would like to see some continuance
Mhm.
of, maybe council is like, we go through all these now. It's a good intern job. Go through our ordinances and see what are those reporting that we should be expecting.
So we do, if you look on page 17, it says information to be supplied, section 121943, upon request of police chief. So they're the ones in control of requesting that information. So I don't know how that works.
Page 17.
Yeah, the
For the big
12,943 that you had suggested maybe
Yes.
moving.
I guess my thing was more so making that report, including the council in the section
Okay.
where
For what?
where they just automatically Well, my thing would be, I mean, that kind of consideration was one of the ones of stripping out the review portion. And it may not be necessary to go through, bring everybody in the meetings and all that, but, if we got a report semi-annually or annually, just making that language automatic, to where that was good to the councilors. But I mean, you know, I don't know how intensely we need to work on the review. We're gonna put time in, we're right now. And then is there any kind of control over some process?
We can look at that, you know, of course, you know, that's an issue that I have had for many years is a lot of citizens make complaints to the council and we don't get a record of them. So, you know, the complaints, any citizen complaints, anything like that needs to be going to the police who have the enforcement authority. They are the executive branch. The council is the legislative branch. So the reason council was included in here was to review for if there were needs to do any legislative. That was
That's
used for the
what, that's
legislative.
what, we were
Right.
moving
Yeah.
for that consideration.
So,
What
but
about, could we utilize, as far as complaint, could we utilize our, see quick fix system?
the 311 system. I think some complaints are going there, but I do, you know, I just always take that opportunity to point out, you know, sometimes when I've gone to look to see what we have, you know, I think we're getting some better reporting through the police, but, you know, there's all these complaints, but they are just with the counselors, and that's not the right place for those records to be. So,
Can we put like a link to where you can make your complaint on the signage?
there, it does say, they already have, like, yeah, we can put a link, there's already a place, supposed to be, on the existing sign language, where to call, a number to call the police department, is supposed to be on there.
Well, I think like if you have, like 311, if we added that
Yeah,
complaint, or towing complaint,
yeah.
and we just had the link on here.
They do on some, but it kind of depends, I mean, there needs to be a number that somebody can call the police out on scene, you know, 311, complaint's not gonna get to them, you know, to go out when something is happening. So,
I would say that's something that definitely needs to be included on our signage, that if the person whose vehicle has been towed or booted has a complaint, really, a complaint of any kind, that they need to do that through a police report. I mean, that's one of the things that we've learned through this process, is that we have had tons of people who have contacted us to complain, but in many cases, there's not an accompanying police report to document that, which is, you know, it's sort of a, you know, historically, how we have considered these types of issues has been in the context of police reports. And, you know, for the circumstance where, these types of issues may end up in a court of law, that is the standard for considering the evidence, per se. And sending, you know, as much as I like to hear from my constituents, an email from a constituent to a city councilor has historically not been the standard for evidence. So I think for that reason, it's really important to, however you want to summarize that and put it on the sign, that needs to be included on the signage.
There are a couple of things from the legal perspective that make that, for violations, police officer has to witness the violation. The kind of classic thing I tell people, the police, if you're in an accident, the police usually, unless they see it happen, they don't write tickets. They write up the report and they can indicate, you know, what they see, what kind of indicates which vehicle is at fault, that they didn't see it, they can't write it up as a violation. So the person who witnesses the violation has to, if they want some kind of enforcement, if they want the city to take it to municipal court, get a fine, then they have to go get a summons or a warrant from municipal court, from the magistrates. So the police have to see it happen. So when we've seen circumstances where people have videoed and then sent that to the media, they didn't pick up the phone and call the police and say, hey, this is going on. So first thing you need to do, if you see something that's happening that appears to be a problem or violation, then you need to call the police. And then you can, document it. But if it's not, if the police aren't there, or you don't go down and make that complaint with the magistrate, then, that we can't do an enforcement action with it.
So we had talked about setting up a webpage that details all those instructions for the public, just as a general public service, information page, that would live on the city's website. So do you think that's still something that we
Yeah.
could?
I think we need to.
Okay, so that's where we could talk about the process of, if this is an emergency, call the police. If you have a complaint about, something that happened, here's what you do. Because there's kind of two different scenarios, right? There's the immediate emergency complaint, and then there's the complaint of, I was treated unfairly, or they scratched my car, or whatever it is, So,
Yeah.
I think that just having something on the signage, and then, I think we mentioned like dynamic pricing, having something to where, the location where rates can be found on the signage, so even if the rates aren't posted, like where you can, they gotta collect like somewhere,
Yeah.
You should be informed of the rate when you go to the app to make the payment.
Right.
Is that?
So I would say in a circumstance where they are not using some sort of technology, that they not be allowed to have dynamic pricing. Like, you can't have a lot where your payment is in cash, and have dynamic pricing, because, it just doesn't work. The person needs to be able to be in a place to consider whether or not they want to pay that amount. So,
well, I mean, that'll be something we need to write in.
It seems I have seen decks or other commercial lots that have two rates, it's like the daytime rate and an evening rate posted. I have seen that. So I don't think it's impossible to do that in a non-technology, to have different pricing, but if you I'm going in, if it's a pay the kiosk, then you pay, whatever that rate is for the time that you're gonna park. If it's like a lot of decks where you pay as you leave, then, that's the question, if I entered it this time, am I going to be charged, if I entered it 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the rate is one thing, and then it changes at 6 o'clock, is it gonna change?
right.
In that, if when I go out, am I paying one rate for the first 3 hours and another rate for the last hour I'm there? So,
It's fine as long as the price is posted.
Just-
Or that I
They
have a
just
where.
had
Yeah.
dynamic pricing is being exempt from having it posted,
yeah,
which would be solved by, you have to use technology, you have to define technology.
So when you say posted, do you mean posted on the website somewhere, or you mean posted on the
Gotta be signed.
sign? is more of it fluctuates on a daily basis. So like in a bigger city, perhaps where there's more than like Chicago or New York, I could see on the weekends from 5 to 7, it's $20 an hour. You know, but Monday through Friday from 5 to 7, it's $10 an hour. So that would be very hard for us to capture on the side. I do think it needs to be captured when you go and make a payment with the mobile app. It needs to tell you the rate. I think if the rates differ, you know, between daytime and nighttime, and it's a set, kind of more of a set rate, even though it changes, then yes, put that on the side. It's gonna be, if a company wants, I feel like it's their right to be able to change pricing, and if they're doing it hour by hour, changing pricing, how do we account for
We're not
that?
saying you can't, we're just saying it's your responsibility to communicate to the people who are parking your lot. And so just because you know.
Right, but I think it's gonna be hard to put that on a physical sign.
What is their how, we have to decide how we want to require it.
Right.
But, you know, if you have no price, you have to communicate the price at some point in the process of people parking, you know, they would have to have some system of taking the money. Somewhere along that driving and parking, getting out, you have to pay some kind of way. So there has to be some kind of process of communicating the price.
And I think it would be on the app that you're paying, right? It would say the price.
Well, I'm saying is like, if you don't have an app, like it's game day today, $30.
We're talking about two different things, maybe.
Well, I'm saying dynamic price, like we're used to it in the context of the app that automatically does it so you can see real time. But you don't need an app to necessarily utilize dynamic pricing. I can just say, you know, it's 12 o'clock, everybody's supposed to buy lunch, you know, price is higher now. And so like, how do you communicate that?
Another
We'll have a payment, yes.
Another consideration, and I don't necessarily feel one way or the other about this, but, say I've parked, I've agreed to park for 2 hours in a facility at one rate, and it's nearing expiration of my parking time. I get a notification from the app saying, do you want to extend your time? Do we require that they give you an extension at the rate, at the initial rate that you paid, or in a dynamic pricing model, you know, are they allowed to charge you more for that next period?
It's convenient, or it's, yeah.
You know, I'm just stating that as it's a possibility that we may need to account for. I don't care one way or the other, I'm just thinking that we may need to acknowledge that could potentially happen. We need to clear out of here, so Council President can do her budget comments.
Oh, boy.
But,
Let us do some research too on this,
Yeah.
kind of what other cities are doing, how they're communicating dynamic pricing.
And then,
Because to be honest, I don't know.
Which I mean, I think for the scenario I'm kind of looking at, it is more, there's something going on where they would.
Special
hold
event.
some tennis
Yes.
signs, But I mean.
Yes, and that's what I meant when I said, I think you're talking about stuff.
yeah.
But I mean, it's the same, it's still.
Yeah.
And we just, it's whatever we define it as.
And I was kind of holding generic definition or
hey,
Hey, guys.
get it down.
and you know, so I mean, obviously, you need to be careful about communications, you know, within the group for open meetings, raising the name on people, welcome to email me any comments, suggestions.
Okay. So, Councilor Woods, are you comfortable advancing this with no recommendation, so that we can go ahead and get a public?
Yeah, I move we send this full council with no recommendation.
All right, second, all in favor say aye.
be available, probably with VDOT, and so if somebody wants to go look at it, just a hard copy. So, that will be made available, but we need to have it final.
So the signage, one of the signage can be that.
Final. Are we gonna, I think I missed, when are we setting the public hearing?
Would like to have the public hearing sometime in August, preferably not August 15th, because I know I'll be out of town on that date.
Yes.
So,
When does this committee meet again?
the second week of August,
Budget hearing's the 14th.
is that,
Budget hearing was the 14th. That's all.
Oh, yeah, 14.
So,
Can we do it August 8th? Set the,
yeah, I was looking at doing that, I was just looking to see if the committee would meet, yeah, that was the day I was looking to put the resolution on.
to have
set
the
the hearing.
to actually have the hearing.
No,
No, to set the hearing.
to set the hearing.
set the public hearing, which means that the earliest date that it would appear on the council agenda would be 2 weeks after
August 22nd.
August 22nd. And, again, if it gets to council and we have a public hearing, the council can always elect to, allow more time for revisions, we don't, the
Yeah.
council isn't under any obligation to
Right.
pass the ordinance at that time.
And the council can make amendments on the dais, it's not like a zoning ordinance where there's a set process, so it could be amended, on the dais or